Hey there, Book Talk. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about one of the characters from my Powers Legacy series, Zephyr, who has a substance abuse problem. And I just wanted to take a minute to address it. So if you haven't read up to this book yet, I would just pause the video. There will be spoilers ahead. Zephyr's childhood was not nearly as charmed as his brothers and his sister. His father had a deep loathing for him, and it often resulted in abuse. And his mother was kind of helpless to do anything about it. Not that she didn't try, but there was nothing that she could do to stop his father because his father was the king. What power did she have? She wasn't even the queen. She was basically the king's mistress. So after a particularly terrible incident with his father when he was a teenager, his uncle, who was also kind of helpless to stop his brother from abusing this child, had given him some alcohol, and he said this is going to help take the edge off, right? Like Zephyr had suffered pretty badly in this incident, and his uncle was just trying to make everything better. But it kind of becomes a crutch for him. Like every time his father does something to him, anytime his father looks at him wrong, anytime he feels cornered, that's his go-to. So his family sees this. They see the problem, but they kind of like brush it off. So there's a scene where his brother Dominic and him are having a conversation, and he immediately turns to the drink. And Dominic just looks at him and says, "Please don't." But he doesn't push it, right? Dominic just kind of lets it go because he knows that nothing he says is going to stop his brother from drinking. And then towards the end of the second book, he is at the big ball, and one of his brothers has given him a mission, and he has no interest in this mission. He knows he's going to screw something up, and he just wants to back off and leave well enough alone, but he knows that he can't. He has to do this. Of course, the first thing that he does when he walks in the door, he turns straight to the alcohol. He drinks some wine, he goes right to the bar, and he starts drinking whiskey. He's basically doing shots of whiskey at the bar. And one of the local lords comes up, and he's making some really suggestive and highly inappropriate comments about Paige, and it sets Zephyr off. And he gets a little bit too aggressive, but things kind of smooth over, and he finds an excuse for the reason that he's acting the way that he's acting. But then the queen comes over. The queen, who is his stepmom, I guess, because it's not his mom, but she was married to his father. Anyway, that's a whole other confusing thing. But the queen comes over and cuts him off. She tells the bartender to make sure that the entire staff knows Zephyr gets nothing else. He is done with alcohol for the night. And he doesn't know how to deal with this. So he goes around the room basically thinking about how he can try to siphon drinks off of other people that he knows that are there. And of course, as predicted, he screws up big time by the end of this night. There's one of the girls commits suicide, and he is outside alone with Paige, which he knows is bad news, but she was having a panic attack, so he took her outside, and they get a little bit too close with each other. And this is the point where things really start to explode for him. He finds out the truth about his family, specifically the truth about his parents, that the guy that he thought was his father was never really his father, and that the guy that he thought was his uncle was his father all along. And he finds out because he catches his mother with his uncle, and she confesses everything to him. But this has just been an awful night for Zephyr. So he has this catastrophic interaction with Paige. One of the girls that he's supposed to be keeping an eye on has committed suicide. And now he finds out that everything that he thought he knew about his family is a lie. And he kind of jumps off the deep end. But to make matters even worse, his mom dies. He knew that she was dying already. She had this illness that was kind of eating away at her, and he knew that she was going to go someday. He just wasn't prepared for it yet. And he certainly has a lot of regrets surrounding what happened, because his last words spoken to her were words of anger because he had just found out the truth about his family. So this is where we start to get into spoiler territory for this book. At the beginning of the third book in the series, Zephyr has hit rock bottom. There is literally no lower that he can go. His brother, who turned out to be his cousin, who is now the new king, had found out that he and Paige, who was supposed to be kind of quasi-engaged to the new king, his cousin brother. Anyway, so Cypress found out that Zephyr and Paige had this moment together outside, and he basically told Zephyr to get the hell out. And he banished him and stripped him of all of his titles because Zephyr had broken the law, and Cypress was angry. So at the beginning of the third book, he is sleeping on his friend Nat's couch. He's got nowhere to go. Nobody will hire him. Nobody will rent anything to him because he has angered the king and nobody wants to take that risk. So what does he do? He turns to alcohol, and he starts drowning himself in it. Like, he is standing on the rocks where his uncle father had died at the beginning of the first book, and he is contemplating his own life, and he knows that he doesn't have it in him to commit suicide, right? He's not that low, and he wouldn't do that. But he has definitely hit rock bottom. Like, he's standing there on these deadly rocks, holding a bottle of whiskey in his hand, just drinking and lamenting his life. So the reason that I bring this up is because there are people who kind of hit the hot button on me for it. But here's the thing. I'm not sorry. I try to represent real people as much as I can in my writing. And Zephyr's situation was maybe a little bit unique because he was a prince who wasn't a prince, but it was also not really unique because there are a lot of teenagers out there who suffer from abuse, and a lot of teenagers out there who turn to substances to help alleviate some of their internal pain. It's the way that they deal with the world. It's the piece of control that they have and the thing that they can use to wash everything away. And so I won't apologize for it, but I will say that after he hits rock bottom, there are people there that help pull him out. He has a support system despite how alone he feels in this situation. Everything in these books is very complex, and the characters are very richly detailed. They have their own sets of emotions, their own sets of motivations, and their own flaws. And this is definitely Zephyr's biggest flaw. And it's the biggest hurdle that he has to overcome. He has to get past the fact that he has this problem. And it takes somebody from outside of his family to help him get there. He recognizes the problem, but he doesn't care. It isn't until Easton comes into his life and forces him to stop drinking that things really start to turn around for him. He sees the mistakes that he's made in the past, and he's prepared to take the steps to make up for it.